The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them a light has shined. For a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Dear Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Is that how you would characterize, I wonder, the modern world? As darkness? What about the last 6 months? As darkness? I think it's something we feel slightly more pressingly now than we have perhaps in the past. Is it possible that coronavirus has shined a light on the places where we feel the failings of our world most dearly? Has it revealed to you, I wonder, the darkness of our ignorance? How the world has fallen apart at the hands of a disease, something we all thought a thing of the past. And the darkness of those who are in charge, perhaps. The experts who seem to have as little of an understanding as the rest of us, whose advice feels contradictory and confused. Maybe to say nothing of the government, whose rules appear both restrictive and yet ineffective. Do we feel darkness? Or is it the darkness of the unknown? Do we fear, perhaps, what's in the darkness? Slowly creeping inside of us, is there the darkness of fear, the darkness of fragility in the face of the world and of coronavirus? Maybe it's less a fear of disease and more a fear of the world not being the way we would want it to be, the way it was. Is this year at college really going to look like the year that we had all been waiting for? For those who were here last year, is it going to feel like normal life? For the freshers, is it going to live up to all the expectations that we'd put on it? Do we live in fear that uni isn't everything we'd hoped? Is there the darkness of fear within us? But what about a greater darkness? What about a moral darkness? Do we feel that too? That beneath everything, all the good we see around us, there's some fundamentally wrong. That the world isn't going the way we want it to be. Maybe not because of ignorance, but because of negligence. That for all the loving actions that coronavirus has sparked, there are far more who've responded to it in a way we think they ought not to have. Pictures of human greed and self-centeredness. And we see that in the way we treat the world, don't we? If there's one thing that Extinction Rebellion has shown all of us, it's that greed is a far better motivator for doing what we know to be right than selflessness. Or the darkness that's seen in protests. I wonder, would the BLM movement tell us that we live in a world of darkness? A world sometimes filled with mourning and grief and pain. And perhaps most shockingly, even within ourselves too. Do we feel the darkness? The fact that we haven't always done the things that we want to have? That the self-motivation we condemn in others is so easily something we are just as guilty of? The way that we've turned away from what we know to be right? Do we feel the darkness of ignorance within ourselves too? The lack of understanding of the truth? I wonder if we see ourselves as a people who walk in darkness, under the shadow of something we could only term evil, perhaps. And so the question becomes, what does Jesus mean for the world that dwells in darkness? I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Do you follow Jesus' claim here? There is real darkness. There is true evil in the world. But there's also an antidote to this darkness, an answer. And it's not to pretend that the darkness doesn't exist, but rather to turn towards the light. I am the light. Standing in the temple during the festival of tabernacles, Jesus would have been surrounded by candles, marking the occasion of the time when God led his people out of slavery in Egypt and into the land of freedom. The Israelites followed the pillar of fire, the pillar of light, through the desert, through the darkness of night and into the promised land. And here is Jesus standing in the temple, looking at the light designed to remind people of God. And his claim, I am the light. His claim is to be able to offer us the same light that led them out of slavery in Egypt, and that it can lead us out of the darkness of our own hearts and the darkness of the world. A light which is at core not just the enemy, but the antithesis of the darkness. A light which is not overcome by the darkness. A light which responds to ignorance with wisdom, to fear with security and comfort. A light which responds to immorality, to evil with freedom and forgiveness, with redemption and reconciliation. A light which shines in the darkness, and the darkness is not overcome. Jesus' claim has never diminished the reality of darkness. It has never belittled the reality of human suffering or of evil or of pain, but has promised that it can be, that it will be, and in fact that it was ultimately dealt with. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I hope that we're able to see how the idea of the light of life flows so easily out of everything that we've looked at so far. How Jesus' light is life-affirming, not life-denying. And Jesus' claim here is stark, isn't it? I am the one out of whom life flows, and through whom you can have life, and a life lived to the full, a life lived in light. See, John's I am sayings are structures around which the whole gospel is built, is written, is shaped, it hangs together. And they're central to everything he does because they're the way that Jesus reveals himself to us. And here tonight, Jesus tells us that central to everything Jesus is his identity as light. A divine identity. An identity that is relevant to all people across the world and throughout time. People who dwell in darkness, the darkness of themselves and the darkness of the world around them. But then Jesus never fails to challenge us and our worldviews. I wonder if you saw that in the undertone of our reading and in everything said so far. Jesus' identity as the light of the world is a radical claim, but it's also an exclusive claim. To grapple with Jesus means to accept him as the light exclusively. And having the light it offers, well, it means to follow him. I wonder whether you caught that at the end of our reading tonight. Jesus makes his radical claim, and it's followed by a discussion with the Pharisees, where they accuse Jesus of testifying for himself, and with only himself as reference. And Jesus rebukes them and teaches us in two ways. Firstly, he argues that they don't understand him, and therefore they can't judge him. See, the problem they had with accepting him as light of the world is that they fundamentally didn't understand who he was. And the problem is true, just as true, if not more true for us today. To turn to Jesus and to walk in the light means to accept him for who he is, for who he claims to be, that he's not of the world, but beyond the world. See, they don't know him. They don't know where he's come and where he's going. To accept Jesus as light means to understand him as the only Son of God, the one who came from heaven to save us. To receive the light means to understand Jesus for who he is, the one who in the beginning was with God and was God. But see, the second problem the Pharisees have, and through which Jesus teaches us today, is that to not know Jesus is to not know God. The claim is that light has come into the world and people love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. And that's an incredibly harsh statement he makes, just as much then as now. See, when questioned on who Jesus' Father is, he answers them, "You know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also." Jesus' claim to be the light of the world is an exclusive one. To follow him means living a life, having the light of life, a light that is life-affirming and fulfilling. He offers us a beautiful promise, but a stark challenge. Will we walk in the light? Will we follow him? And through him, will we see the world around us as it truly is? Jesus is a light that shines and a light that reveals. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And that becomes a question to all of us. How do we respond to the light that has come into the world?